This video covers how to zone your building in Sefaira's web applications, both Sefaira Architecture and Sefaira Systems. I am in the Zoning tab of the web application. Here you can select a zoning strategy, see a visualization of that strategy on each floor of your building, and assign space uses to each zone. First, let's look at the types of zoning strategies available. The first type on this list is one zone per floor. And this is exactly what it sounds like, a single zone on each floor of the building. This is really only useful for very large-scale massing comparisons very early in design, when the interior layout is probably not yet known. However, most use cases in the web applications benefit from more detail than this. Therefore, the default type of zoning strategy in the web application is basic perimeter core zoning. And as you can see, what this does is it offsets from the perimeter of the building by a certain amount and creates perimeter zones in that offset and then core zones beyond that. And this is a good default for most early stage analysis. It enables good comparative sizing of central HVAC equipment, good comparative assessment of peak loads, and good thermal comfort calculations. In fact, this is a standard approach for many thermal comfort standards that you may encounter. Now, you can adjust the perimeter depth of this strategy. However, 15 feet, which is the default, is a fairly standard value. The next type of zoning strategy available is detailed perimeter core zoning. So what's the difference between basic and detailed? Well, in basic, if I click on this north-facing zone, you'll see that all of the north-facing zones are actually part of the same zone. So this model really only has 5 zones, one for each orientation and one core zone. In the detailed option, each of those zones will be its own zone. So if I click on this zone, you can see that it is unique and these other ones are unique as well. When would that be important? Well, that will be important if you're looking for much more precise HVAC sizing and peak load information, and it can be important for buildings that have a lot of self-shading characteristics or facade articulation. So for example, you can see that some of these south-facing zones have a fairly significant amount of self-shading from the building. So the loads on this zone is probably going to be fairly different from the loads on some of these other south-facing zones. If I want to take that level of detail into account, I can use the detailed perimeter core zoning. You should be aware that results will take a little bit longer to run in this option because more zones are being submitted to the analysis engine. The final type of zoning is one zone per room. And this is the most specific and allows the most accurate analysis of all the zoning strategies. And it does require that you draw either zones or rooms in your 3D model, and those are then recognized and visualized in Sefaira's web application. Now, this video is not going to cover how to draw those zones. We cover that in other videos. But I will talk a little bit about how we go about zoning and why you might want to use this strategy. So you would use room-by-room zoning for zone-level HVAC equipment sizing or very detailed thermal comfort studies. And the name one zone per room is actually a little bit of a misnomer because the best practice is really not to think in terms of modeling every single room, but rather to think in terms of a zone. And generally what you're trying to do is group spaces that share a similar load profile. And that includes both internal and external loads on that space. So oftentimes that means that you're grouping together similar uses on each orientation. So in this example, for instance, I have grouped together cellular office spaces on the east and the south orientations of this building. And I can do that because they have similar load profiles. Obviously, they have the same internal loads because they have the same space use and same occupancy schedules. And on an orientation by orientation basis, they also share similar external loads. So how much solar gain they're getting or how much envelope gain and loss they have in that zone. And the reason why you would do that rather than model every single room is, first of all, modeling every room is going to dramatically increase the amount of time you have to spend on the analysis without necessarily giving you any better results. So you'd have to have more time to draw all those rooms, then to configure each one in Sefaira, and then the analysis itself would take more time because you would be submitting many more zones to the simulation engine. And again, grouping those is going to give you very similar results. One final note here, you can see that on the zoning tab you are able to change the space use both on a floor-by-floor basis and on a zone-by-zone basis. And this is something that we will cover a little bit more in other videos.